Hello everybody, I am Rue and this is my cozy corner of booktube, Rue with the Books. If you are new here, then welcome, and if you've been here before, then welcome back. It is always great to see a friendly face. Talking Books is a series in which I talk about books that I have recently read, what I am currently reading, and what I plan to read next. This is going to be a bit of a weird Talking Books episode because I am only going to be covering what I recently read. This is because I have a special video planned in which I read what my girlfriend recommends to me for a whole month. So I will unveil what my TBR would be in that video. And it's going to be more of a reading vlog kind of format, where I give my thoughts as I read rather than give a review right at the end. So with all of that explained and out of the way, now you guys understand why it's going to be a little bit different. Be sure to press the like button to support my content, and if you like books, booktube and booktube content, press the subscribe button to join the Rue with the Books community so you never miss one of my weekly uploads. There's a little bit of a theme for this episode, which is that I've read a few crime books, which is interesting because those are books that I don't really tend to pick up very much. So today's question is, what is the best crime book that you have ever read? Now, grab a beverage and let's finally get around to talking. What have I recently read? So the first book I have read is Lady Joker Volume 1 by Kaoru Takamura. And this book is about a group of people who meet on a racetrack every Sunday to make bets on horses. These people that meet up are all very, very different, but what they do share in common is a large dissatisfaction with the lives that they lead. The cast of characters is chosen in such a way to highlight the social struggles, griefs, and hardship of post-war Japan, in a bid to feel a little something and maybe change the courses of their lives. These people decide to group up together and form a band of criminals, and they call themselves Lady Joker, which is, the name of the book. Their plan is to kidnap and hold for ransom the CEO of Japan's largest beer conglomerate, Hinode Beer. We follow a poorly socialized genius stuck working as a welder, a demoted detective with a chip on his shoulder, a Zainichi Korean banker sick of being ostracized for his ethnicity, a struggling single dad of a teenage girl with Down syndrome, and the fifth man bringing them all together is an elderly drugstore owner grieving his grandson who has died in suspicious circumstances. Doesn't that group of characters sound really interesting? That's all on the blurb, so, when I read it, it really hooked me in, and I was like, damn, I really want to read this book. Anyway, this book is inspired by a real crime case, which is typically referred to as the Monster with 21 Faces, but I know nothing about this true crime case because I didn't want to read up on it and, well, spoil myself the book. So, I picked up this book because it sounded really interesting. I'm a big fan of a solid heist book because they are thrilling, they're high stakes, intense, and a lot of fun. I was interested in reading a genre fusion of crime and literary fiction because, well, this book is supposedly studied in Japanese schools. And I really wanted to follow this cast of characters who all sounded really interesting, and see how they go about planning the heist, executing it, what maybe the roadblocks would be, what gets in their way, what would be the consequences. So I really wanted to know all of these things in terms of the plot and the characters. Unfortunately, I didn't really get what I was hoping for with this one. The part of the story that follows these characters is very, very short in comparison to the length of the book. We see them meeting up on the racetrack, we see their interactions, and there are some interesting plot threads that present themselves, which relate to how Hinode Beer is actually tied in to the past and the story of these various characters. There are some pretty shocking moments that did have me intrigued, but well, then after that it just went a little bit pear-shaped. After committing to pulling off this heist, the book really shifts priorities and starts giving us all of these different POVs that I just didn't really care about. One of the largest POVs explored in this book is the CEO that gets kidnapped himself. We get all of this really tedious, dull information about his role in the beer business, how the company has grown, how the company does its marketing, how it competes with other beer businesses. I wanted to know about the crime aspects, but I just got chapters upon chapters of business jargon that I couldn't really care less about. Even though I've not read it, but I'm just saying this based on what I've heard, I'd say this book is like the Moby Dick of beer company everyday today, where instead of it being about whales, it's about how a beer business would operate. There is a lot of emphasis on the media reaction to the case, how they plan out writing and releasing the articles on this story, how there is an embargo or essentially a block on releasing articles by the order of the police about this case after the CEO gets kidnapped and a clue has been found. We get lots of POVs that aren't the characters I was interested in, and a lot of the storylines in this kind of sense, for me at least, were a little bit dull. I was actually really interested in how all of the members of Lady Joker tied together. As you read the book, a kind of story slash mystery kind of unravels, relating to discrimination about a minority population in Japan, as well as a threatening letter sent to Hinode Beer in the past that really kicks off this chain of events that leads to everything that ends up happening. I really like this aspect of the book, but it was really heavily overshadowed by all the company and media stuff that I've already talked about, which took up way too much time in the book. I feel like I'm stuck in between a rock and a hard place with this one. I really didn't like this book, but I've now invested so much time into it that I feel like I have to pick up the second book, Volume 2, to finish the story off. Because now that everything has finally been set up, the execution might rein me back in, and I might actually enjoy the second and final book. But if I don't, then I am just going to be absolutely miserable reading the finale. It's kind of unfortunate that I didn't like this one, because I have kind of a bad track record at the moment with Japanese fiction, having disliked more or equal amounts of books as I have enjoyed. So hopefully I'll pick up some Japanese books in the future as well that I do enjoy to kind of even out that ratio. So overall, I rated Lady Joker Volume 1 2 stars out of 5. The next book that I read was Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. This one has been on my TBR for a very long time, so I was really excited to dive into this one. Cloud Atlas is a story that follows 6 whole separate POVs across different countries and different ages. The story kicks off with Adam Ewing, who is a lawyer that appears to be suffering from a deadly brain parasite and is doing everything in his ability to look for a cure. Next, we have a composer who ends up working for a blind maestro, helping him compose music and play the instruments and everything. We then have a murder mystery with a corporate crime twist, tackling themes of corruption and stuff like that. Then we head to Timothy Cavendish, who is struggling with debt, and he essentially runs away in a bid to escape his debtors, but stuff goes very, very wrong. We then head to a futuristic neo-corporate Korea, and it's kind of an interesting little story with, I guess, aspects of rebellion and betrayal and things like that. And finally, we have Zachary in a post-apocalyptic Hawaii. One of the best things in this book is David Mitchell's use of prose. Each POV is written in a unique style. For example, the lawyer uses a lot of very big words, whereas the composer uses very musical language. The journalist uses very easy to understand language, as if you're kind of reading one of her articles. Tom Cavendish's language is very accessible. And then corporate Korea, because it's got a kind of sci-fi twist to it, has very scientific language. And then the post-apocalyptic Hawaii has a made-up language, spoken in a very kind of country kind of style. So David Mitchell proves himself to be an absolute beast when it comes to switching between these various styles, and if you are into prose, then this book should be very much up your alley. I found this book to be very 50-50. I enjoyed half of the POVs, being the musician, the journalist, and Tom Cavendish. All the others I didn't really enjoy so much. The chapters in this book are very, very long, so switching to a POV that you don't enjoy is quite rough. I wasn't a fan of the corporate sci-fi Korea POV, so going from that to the post-apocalyptic Hawaii one, which I also didn't really enjoy that much, was just a very, very long stretch of non-enjoyment. There was nothing inherently wrong with the POVs I didn't like, I just don't feel like I really gelled with the proses, and so I don't really comprehend everything that easily. If you're good at jumping from one type of prose to another, then you're likely not going to have the same issues as me. And it's one of those things as well, is when I jump from one book to another, switching up an author, it typically takes me a little bit of time to adjust to the writing style and start really appreciating the story itself. So there's a bit of kickback of starting to read a new book, and it felt like that was what was happening with every single different POV. Was it took me a little bit of time to get into each kind of character and their story within the overall book, because this writing style just kept switching and switching and switching. I was really excited about how all of the POVs in this book were meant to be interconnected. One of my favorite styles of story and writing devices is where there's different POVs and characters with little connection, but over the course of their stories they either come together somehow, or we find what the link is between these characters, and as kind of like a little jigsaw it ends up building together and you finally understand what this image that you're meant to get at the end is. But the connections in this book were kind of vague and almost left to your own inference, so that aspect of the story didn't really satisfy me that much, which is a shame, because it's one of the things that made me really excited to actually read this book. I feel like I didn't really enjoy this book as much as I should have. I think if the chapters were maybe a little bit more bite-sized, considering the book's difficulty and how it constantly switches the style of writing, for the most part I would have had an easier time digesting everything over the course of its pages. I think a lot of the content in this book was lost on me because I just couldn't focus enough to actually enjoy it. So I probably need to do a reread of Cloud Atlas at some point and try to take it a little bit slower. Anyway, overall, I rated this book 3 stars out of 5. As I kind of said, I really did like half of the POVs, whereas I didn't like half of them. So overall, I just thought it was average, but you know, this is a very popular book, so do take my kind of rating of it with a grain of salt. So after 2 rather long and pretty difficult books, I needed a little bit of popcorn fiction to just get myself back into the swing of things. I've been talking about starting the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher for a very long time on this channel, and finally I managed to get around to reading book number 1. I hope to read books 2 and 3 later on in this year, and with so many books in this series, this is far from the end of my Dresden Files journey. Stormfront by Jim Butcher follows Harry Dresden, the only wizard for hire in Chicago. Harry tends to get requests for help from the local police force on various different cases that, you know, they are taking themselves on to solve, as well as odd jobs like finding missing objects, and these things serve to help him to, you know, make ends meet. Because even though he's a powerful wizard, he still has rent to pay. So, with a double homicide occurring in the city, the police do ask for Harry's help in finding the perpetrator, who does seem to be a rogue black hat wizard. Meanwhile, a lady also asks for help in finding a missing person, her husband. The book sees Harry working on 2 separate cases which, over the story, are uncovered to be linked together. I actually really enjoyed this book. I did joke about it being the popcorn fiction that I needed, but it really is the truth. The book is quite short at just about 300 pages in length, and it does an absolutely fantastic job of introducing the reader to the world, the way that the magic works and its rules, various characters that are likely to crop up again over the course of the series. I think this book's plot was fine, it was okay. For a murder mystery with heavy detective elements, I feel like the pacing and the nature of the reveals didn't really hit that hard. The reader doesn't have much of an advantage in piecing everything together. A lot of it is Harry kind of just figuring things out on his own without really a logical point for the reader to try and understand it themselves. I'm not really the kind of person that tries to solve everything. I kind of like to go with the flow and just, learn things with the characters. But even still, this element of the story did feel a little bit disjointed and it didn't work that well for me. On the other hand, I did really enjoy the characters. Considering this is an urban fantasy series, it feels very, very magical with all of the supernatural elements that are present within the story. We have vampires, we have fairies, we have talking skulls, and we also have demons. All in the midst of these, mundane police officers and civilians and regular detectives and women. Heavy emphasis on women because Harry can't stop meeting women he's attracted to that do tend to get a little bit flirty. We also get the debut of what I assume will be Harry's arch nemesis, Morgan, who I would like to see appear in the series again as a kind of constant thorn in Harry's side. Overall pacing of the story was quite good. This is contrasted to the kind of pacing of the reveals. I'm kind of separating them as two separate elements here. I was constantly excited to see where the story goes next. The chapters were also very bite-sized, allowing me to feel like I was constantly making progress. There were also some rather shocking things that happened, which kind of changed everything and just kept me on the edge of my seat and wanting to see where the story goes next and just enjoying everything, enjoying the world and all that kind of thing. I enjoyed the use of magic in this book. It definitely has its limits and Harry can only use whatever he has at hand. That may be certain potions, it may be his blasting wand, it may be a spell circle that he has etched into the floor. It's kind of a hard magic system, but it's not like a Brandon Sanderson level of hard magic where he's created this very intricate magic system. It's quite normal magic, casting fire spells and that kind of thing. Leading on from the magic, the action was quite good and it has gotten me excited about the prospects of reading more of it in the future. There are very real threats over the course of the story and Harry never really seems overpowered. He kind of really meets his match with the villain and things do look quite dark and grim at certain moments in the book, so it does feel quite good to see Harry overcome these different obstacles. So yeah, a very solid start to the series. I enjoyed it a lot and I'm excited to get in on more of that urban fantasy wizarding action. So overall, I rated this book 3 stars out of 5. So I had a little bit of time till I could start recording the TBR pull of my special upcoming video, so I wanted to pick up something else to read. Luckily, I had a dainty little Sherlock Holmes book I picked up from a book sale recently, and it was the perfect opportunity to pick it up and give it a read. I'm not the biggest crime/detective book fan, but I always try to have an open mind, and Sherlock Holmes is classic. So, how could I not? The Sign of Four by Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle starts with a Sherlock using illicit substances to stimulate his brain, until a lady approaches him and reveals a mystery about her father, who was coming back from the army in India and then disappears out of the blue. The lady has also been getting random pearls sent to her yearly worth a lot of money, tying into this mystery of her father's appearance because it has the anonymous gifts come accompanied by a note. It's a pretty decent Sherlock Holmes book all in all. It has an interesting plot with enough room to breathe so that it can go anywhere, and it pretty much does. It has a closed room murder mystery further into the book, which has Sherlock Holmes do what Sherlock Holmes does best. That being, making deductions about clues and, racking his brain for potential leads and just being Sherlock. It has high-speed chases, it has action and drama, and an interesting epilogue that kind of unveils the motivations of the villain and why everything happens. And even that kind of backstory at the end has various tropes and fun things going on that keep it interesting and an enjoyable experience. Um, so yeah, the villain has an interesting backstory that I felt really immersed in towards the end. Going off reviews, it's a bit of a love it or hate it situation. Some people love this backstory, other people couldn't care less. But I liked it. However, this book certainly does still feel like a short story. There were some elements of the book that felt like they could have been fleshed out more, such as the actual closed room murder mystery part and stuff like that. And Sherlock doing Sherlock could have been more intense, vivid, and interesting. I feel like the short story collection I read of Sherlock Holmes actually did the deductions in a better way. So, as a comparison, while this book has a longer, stretching story, it doesn't do the actual Sherlocky stuff quite as well as some of those other short stories did. Anyway, overall, I rated this book 3 stars out of 5. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have made it this far, I hope that Sherlock Holmes blesses you with a dowry today. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to press the like button to help me out and subscribe to join my little community. Be sure to let me know your answer to today's question or just let me know what you read last. I would love to hear from you and I reply to all of my comments, so I would love to have a chat with you down there below. If you would like to connect with me outside of YouTube, I have my TikTok, my Instagram, my Goodreads, and my Storygraph in the description below. Anyway, until next time, Root out.